All right, going live. So welcome everybody to another exciting edition of the e-NABLE Monthly Bionics meeting. We've got a monthly meeting along with 5 other monthly meetings that are recurring. This is the first of the month. Welcome to July. I'm just gonna get a couple things in the queue and get started. And we're here today with Adil Akhtar. Really excited to have you with us. Thanks for joining. I could do a quick introduction. So we have Dr. Akhtar is the CEO and founder of Bionic, a company developing advanced bionic limbs that are accessible to all people with limb differences. Dr. Akhtar is a PhD in neuroscience and an MS in electrical and computer engineering from the University of Illinois. He received his MS in computer science in 2008, BS in biology in 2007, and in 2001 was named one of MIT's Technology Review Top 35 Innovators Under 35. So thanks for joining us today, and without further ado, I'll pass it to you.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. I'm grateful for the opportunity to get a chance to talk to you guys and hear what you guys have been working on as well. And I've been following the e-NABLE community for a very, very long time, since like I don't know, at least 10 years when we started first 3D printing our own bionic limbs and everything too. So I have I have an immense respect for all the stuff that you guys have been doing over the years. And so usually when I give these talks, I like to start with a video that the University of Illinois had made, and they play during the halftime of football games. Let's see if I can get that to go. There we go.
How could they do that?
What did you do? Where's the English building?
Could you go over that again?
Hey, can I check that?
When's that paper due?
Can I tell you my idea?
How can we make it cheaper?
Do you think this will work?
How'd that feel?
So if you couldn't tell, that was me at the end of that video. And one of the reasons why I like that video so much is that it highlights the journey of starting off as a young kid who's super curious about the world and everything, going all the way to developing these muscle-powered, neurally controlled bionic limbs. And for me personally, the journey started when I was actually 7 years old. My parents are from Pakistan, and I was visiting Pakistan for one of the first times I could remember. And that was the first time I met someone with a limb difference. And she was my age, missing her right leg, using a tree branch as a crutch, and living in poverty. And that's what inspired me to want to go into the field of prosthetics and develop advanced bionic limbs that were accessible to everyone. And so I went to Loyola University Chicago, got a bachelor's in biology there, followed by a master's in computer science. And while I was doing, the original plan was to become an MD, working with as a neurosurgeon or a physical medicine rehab doctor, working with patients with amputations and limb differences. And but it wasn't until my sophomore year of undergrad that I took my first computer science class, and I absolutely loved it. I loved everything about coding and engineering. And if I became a straight up MD, I wouldn't get to do any of that cool stuff. So I wanted to figure out how I could merge my passions in prosthetics and engineering. And it was right down the street in downtown Chicago at a place that used to be called the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago. It's now known as the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. It's the #1 rehabilitation hospital in the US for the last either 31 or 32 years now. And they had just made some huge breakthroughs in, muscle powered, even if you want to go as far as say mind-controlled bionic limbs. And so this, it was back in 2007. This is Amanda Kitts. She lost her left hand above her elbow due to a motorcycle accident, and she is controlling this bionic limb that was developed by Dean Kamen's group, DECA, just by trying to make those same movements with her elbow and with her fingers and with her wrist, the same way she did prior to her amputation. And she's able to do things like, pinch a block, rotate her wrist, like pour cups of objects and all these different activities of daily living using this bionic device. And when I saw this was the perfect combination of physical medicine, rehab, electrical engineering, computer engineering, mechanical engineering, and this was exactly what I wanted to do. Now, the big problem was that, there were a couple. One was that device cost like $100,000 to make, and then the next thing was that it would break like all the time, and it was super fragile. And it turns out that there are over 10 million people with hand amputations across the entire world. 80% of them live in developing nations, and less than 3% have access to affordable rehabilitative care. And so the most common prosthesis available, as you guys probably know, is the split hook design, right? So that's what this man is wearing on his right arm. And the way it works is you've got these two steel pincers with a bicycle cable attached to your shoulders. When you squeeze your shoulders together, the hook opens. When you relax your shoulders, the hook closes, right? So it's only 2 degrees of freedom, right? Or sorry, 1 degree of freedom. It just opens and closes, right? It's controlled by your shoulders, and it looks like a hook, right? So this is technology that hasn't changed since the Civil War era of the United States. It is incredibly durable, though, so that is one of the major benefits of the hook in particular. And so on this man's left side is what we know as a myoelectric prosthesis, right? So myo meaning muscle, electric meaning, well, electric, right? And so he's wearing 2 muscle sensors, so electromyographic EMG muscle sensors over his forearm. So one over his wrist flexor and one over his wrist extensor, and that controls the hand to open and close. Now, that particular hand, it's super heavy, it's super slow. And you go a step up from that, where you have like individual finger movements on what we call a multi-articulated hand, then you get like even more expensive bionic hands that break down all the time. They're also super slow. And on top of that, with any of these hands, if you try to touch anything, you can't actually feel the sensation from like individual digits or from the hand at all. And so we set out to solve those problems, and so what we developed is a hand that uses advanced muscle control. So it uses pattern recognition and machine learning algorithms to do more than just open and close, but you can do different grips with it. We made it super robust with using low-cost materials, and we actually do implement 3D printing, and we'll go into that in a bit as well. And then finally, we're the first hand on the market to give users actual touch sensory feedback coming from the fingertips. And we're going to be touching on all of these aspects on how we developed this stuff over the last like 7 to 8 years. So you guys might be familiar already with EMG or muscle control used to use these devices, but as just a quick primer, right? Most everyone is familiar with EKG at the very least, right? So those are the sensors that like you see on TV all the time. When there's an ambulance, you place them over a patient's heart, and then you see that monitor that goes like beep, beep, right? And then if they die, then it flatlines and goes beep, right? So if you imagine that same sensor, but instead of placing it over your heart and measuring like, your cardiac muscle and your electrical activity happening in your heart, you place that over muscles, over your residual, over your body. So if I place it on my forearm, for example, right? When I don't do anything and I relax, you'll see this flat line of activity kind of at the beginning of this plot. And then when I flex my muscles, it's amplifying all those neural signals, all the current and voltages coming from the neurons that are innervating your muscle being amplified, and you can actually measure that on your skin, and you'll see this huge burst of electrical activity that's happening on the right side of that plot. And to illustrate this further, in this next video, you'll see me with 8 channels of electrodes placed around my forearm, and I'm going to be doing different movements with my hand, and you'll see different patterns of muscle activity that I'm recording on the screen of my laptop. So here's the MATLAB showing all 8 channels, and if I squeeze, you can see all channels are active. If I flex, extend, pinch, 3-finger grasp, and open, and close. Okay, so the important thing to note here again is that when I was doing each of those different motions with my hand, there were different patterns of muscle activity that were being recorded on the screen, right? And that's what we can then use eventually for like a machine learning algorithm to detect those different patterns of muscle activity. So when I make a pinch, the hand knows to make a pinch. And when I make a fist, the hand knows to make a fist, etc. And so I finished my bachelor's in biology at Loyola. I got a master's in computer science there. I taught in their CS department for a couple of years. And then in 2010, I came down to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, got another master's in electrical and computer engineering, and then a PhD in neuroscience. And technically, I'm on a leave of absence from medical school, but I don't think I'm going to go back because this is way more fun. But when I joined the MD PhD program here at the University of Illinois, they didn't do prosthetics here, and they did robotics. And so there was a professor who was doing like some brain machine interface stuff, and he was in aerospace engineering, Professor Tim Brettel, and that's the lab I joined and I got my PhD in. And because we didn't have prosthetics at the time, and we were an aerospace lab, what we did have were drones. And one of my first projects, this was back in 2012, was to control the flight of a drone just by using my muscles. And that's what this next video shows.
Okay. All right.
So when I rotated my wrists, the drone took off. When I point them to the right, it rotates clockwise. When I squeeze my fists together, it'll fly forward. When I point my wrist to the left, it rotates counterclockwise. And then when I rotate my wrist again, the drone will land. And, that was like a really fun demonstration of, what we could do with this like, muscle pattern recognition technology that we were developing with these like these EMG sensors that we were also developing at the time too. But I didn't, I went into this field because I wanted to actually build prosthetic limbs for people with limb differences, not necessarily to just do like these Jedi mind tricks with novelty toys, right? And so we had actually established a collaboration with the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago, and got a chance to work with the $1 million like bionic devices and everything, right? But still the RAC/Shirley Roundability Lab, it's 2.5 hours north from here. And if we got a chance to work with these devices, we'd maybe get like a half an hour to use it. And if we broke it, and again, these things break like all the time, like, then we'd be in even more trouble, right? So it was around like 2013, 2014 that there was a huge boom in consumer 3D printing, right? And now like every single high school, almost every grade school has like their own 3D printers, and all kids know like what this stuff. At least if you're in a STEM field, you're familiar with 3D printing these days. And so it was just gaining traction back in 2013, 2014, and we were like, we're students at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. We're one of the top engineering schools in the world. Why don't we try and develop our own prosthetic limbs? And so over the last 8 years, we've gone through about 9 different prototypes. I've got 5 of them shown here. Some of them you guys might be familiar with. So that one all the way in the top left is the InMove arm that is part of a full humanoid robot that you can 3D print by a French designer, Guy Langeron. And we modified it so it was just the arm, and that you could use like EMG to control it. This was again back in like 2013, 2014 that we were doing that. But the big problem with that was that the motors are located in the forearm, and if your patient still has their forearm, you can't physically place all that stuff there, right? And so we had to move to designs where we could move all the electronics into the hand itself, and then have just sensors that would go on the residual limb, and then we could mount it to a user's residual limb as well. And so the second hand that you see in the top middle, that was based off of like a very early open bionics design. It was called the Dexterous Hand. And we modified it so that you could put like our own motor controllers in there, and our own pattern recognition system. And then we just kept like, then the 3rd, 4th, and 5th designs were ones that we came up with our own, and we've actually open sourced those ones that you see on the screen too, as well. And it got more and more anthropometric, and what looks more like a human hand, and it was more packed with sensors like touch sensors in there as well, and encoders and all of that too, as we continue to iterate on these designs over the years. And so we're going to focus on those very first two just for a little bit, just to highlight, the journey that we've taken to get to the point that we are, right? And so it was in 2014 that we got the chance to, or that we met this man. And so this is David Krupa. He is the CEO and sorry, can you guys hear me all right? Okay, cool. So David Krupa, he's the CEO and founder of the Range of Motion Project. They're a nonprofit organization based out of the US, Guatemala, and Ecuador. And their whole mission is to provide prosthetics to those who can't afford them in those nations, because 80% of people with limb differences are in developing nations, and less than 3% have access to the affordable rehabilitative care. And so he's an alum from the University of Illinois, and he was visiting, and he was winning some award from like the International Studies program. And so, he was giving a talk on prosthetics in these nations. I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. I need to meet this guy. So I met up with him, and I was like, we're 3D printing our own prosthetic limbs or hands in the lab. Is this something you might be interested in? And he was like, yeah, maybe. And so I showed him around the lab the next day, and then I didn't hear back from him again, and that was kind of sad. But 2 weeks later, I get this email from him just in the middle of nowhere that literally said, dude, I felt this vibe between us when we met, and we've got to figure out a way to work together. And that's when Dave's and my bromance began. And 2 weeks after that, he sends me another email that says he was able to secure funding from the US Embassy in Quito to have me and another graduate student go down there and actually try out one of our early designs on a patient. And we've never tried like our hand on a patient, let alone ourselves. We were still like in this prototyping phase on those first two hands. We were still working on that first one, and now we had to come up with a hand that would work for a patient with all the electronics in there. And that's when we moved on to that the Dexterous design from Open Bionics and that second hand. And so fast forward to the day before we leave for Ecuador. And we don't have anything working, but we figure we're going to be in Ecuador for 2 weeks. So we'll have all the pieces and components there. We can figure it out when we get over there, right? So we fly down to Ecuador, and then Dave picks us up from the airport. And the first thing he tells us is, tomorrow we've got a meeting with the US Embassy and they want to see everything working. And we were just like, oh, dang. All right. So the bar is set super high. We got to figure this out. And it was basically the start of 2 weeks of all-nighters trying to get this hand to work, right? And so we get to the hotel room, and we immediately start getting to work, right? And we get the hand to a point where if I flex my wrist really, really, really hard, I could barely get this hand to close. And if I extended my wrist really, really, really hard, I could barely get this hand to open. But it was something, and we had to show them something, right? And so this next video shows us in the hotel room and our attempts at trying to grab a bottle off the table.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you recording? Yeah.
I am.
Okay, so we figured, maybe this Powerade bottle is a little bit too big. Let's switch over to a smaller Coke bottle. All right, so there was still some problems there. So we needed to reprogram it a little bit and try one more time. And this time we're able to grab the bottle, right? And again, this isn't like exactly how it's supposed to work, right? I was supposed to easily make a pinch and a tripod grip and a key grip, and the hand is supposed to do that. But again, we had to show the US Embassy something, and we're really worried that they're going to see this giant mess of a breadboard in this hand and me struggling to open it and close it. And they're going to be like, what did we sponsor here? Why did you guys bring these people down, right? And so we go through all this crazy security, and then we bring them this demo, and we do this for them there. And to our surprise, they're just blown away, right? And the reason is because they've never seen a robot in their lives before. They don't know how it's supposed to work. So they just saw me controlling this with my muscles and they were like, oh my goodness. Okay, so next week, when you do this with a patient, we're thinking that we're going to have 2 newspapers and 3 news crews come out and cover the event. And we were like, oh my goodness, we've never tried this with a patient before. And this is like barely working, right? But we didn't tell them that, right? And then they started asking us questions like, oh, where are you guys from? And we said, oh, we're from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And they said, you're from the University of Illinois. In that case, we're going to bump you up to all the international news stations, because it turns out that at the time, the president of Ecuador was an alum of the University of Illinois, and any chance that he got to promote the university, he took. So if the bar wasn't set high now it was set super high, right? And so, like I said, right, 2 weeks of all-nighters trying to get this hand to work properly. And so the next day we met our patient, and so this is Juan Suquillo. He lost his left hand due to machine gun fire from a helicopter 35 years prior due to a border war between Ecuador and Peru, and he was in the Ecuadorian army. So this picture was taken when we first tried to get him to control the hand. And unfortunately, we weren't able to figure out how to get him to control it. And to make matters worse, he was actually flying out to Brazil the next day, and he wouldn't be back until the following week, the day that the media was coming. So basically, we would have one chance to get it right in front of these international news stations, right? 2 weeks of all-nighters. And so fast forward to the following week, the following Thursday, the day that the media is getting there. The previous night, Dave Krupa tells us that the media is coming at 9 a.m. He's going to pick us up at 6 a.m. to get ready and prepare. And whatever we have at that point, we're just going to have to roll with, right? So 6 a.m. rolls around. Mary, the other graduate student who's pictured in this image, and we have been up for 32 hours straight trying to figure out what is wrong with this hand. So she's looking at this giant mess of a breadboard. I'm looking through like hundreds of lines of Arduino code trying to like figure out what could be wrong here. And 6:08 rolls around, and I see this one line of code that looks a little bit off. And so I send Dave Krupa a text message saying like, hey, I think I might have found something. I just need a little bit more time. And he responds back saying, okay. And it turns out there was one line of code where 2 variables were switched on the opposite side of an equal sign. And as soon as I switched those 2 variables, everything started working. When I made a pinch, the hand made a pinch. When I made a fist, the hand made a fist. And had he come to pick us up on time, we wouldn't have figured that out. So we were lucky that he was late to come get us. But it's one thing for it to work on me. It's another thing for us to have it work on a patient with a limb difference. And so we figure that Juan, he'll get there at 8 a.m., like an hour before the media gets there. We hook him up to all the sensors. We make sure everything's working. So as soon as they get there, we can just grab the video and like we're smooth sailing, right? 9 a.m. rolls around. Juan isn't there. All the media gets there. In fact, Juan doesn't get there until 10. So now all the media is like super annoyed. And again, now we've got one shot to get this right in front of all of them, right? And so we immediately, like the first thing that we do with Juan is that we put all the muscle sensors around him. And then we check to see if we can read the EMG signals coming from his residual limb. And every single channel was dead. We weren't able to read anything from his residual limb. And I was just like, how is this possible? Like, this was just working on me. And so, Mary and I, we go into debug mode trying to figure out what's wrong with this giant mess of a breadboard, while Dave Krupa and Juan, they're stalling with the media, telling the backstory of the range of motion project and how Juan lost his hand, just to buy us enough time to figure out what was wrong with this. And so we had a voltmeter on us, and we checked the voltage on the breadboard, and we noticed that it was reading incorrect values. And usually what that's indicative of is a issue with your power supply. And we were powering this giant mess off of 2 9-volt batteries. And we had noticed that one of the 9-volt batteries had puffed up to about double in size and was burning hot to the touch. And had we not noticed at that point, we might have been on the news for a different reason. But fortunately, I had a fresh 9-volt in my pocket. I took it out. We took off the other one. We hooked it up properly, and all the muscle signals appeared. And we were like, okay, crisis averted. right? But it's one thing for us to read his muscle signals. It's another thing for the machine learning algorithm to respond properly and the mechanics of the hand to also respond according to that. And so the way that this works is that when you turn it on, it'll undergo a training procedure, right? Where the hand is going to make different gestures and you're supposed to mimic those gestures with your residual limb. So the hand will make a pinch and you will hold a pinch for 15 seconds and then it'll record that data with those muscle patterns associated with making a pinch for those 15 seconds. Then it'll make a fist, you hold a fist for 15 seconds, hand open for 15 seconds, tripod grip for 15 seconds, key grip for 15 seconds, the hand relax for 15 seconds. Then the hand opens back up and it builds its machine learning classifier. And then the idea is that the next time you try to make that same grip, it'll say, oh, this looks like the muscle patterns like a pinch when you were trying to do that in your training. And then the hand will do that the same gesture, right? And so we went through this, the 2-minute training procedure. The hand opens up and I ask him to close it and nothing happens. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, what else could go wrong at this point? And this was completely serendipitous as well. So, so I happen to be Muslim, and Juan happens to be the leader of all the Muslims in Ecuador. And to put that in perspective, Ecuador is a 99.9999999% Catholic country. So the odds of me, let alone meeting another Muslim, but the leader of all the Muslims was like completely improbable, right? And so we didn't know this until we had met each other. And then he looks at me and he's just like, Bismillah, say Bismillah. And for those of you who don't know, Bismillah is just invoking the name of God. It's something that Muslims say before they start anything. And so I was just like, okay, Bismillah, Bismillah. And then I hit the reset button on the microcontroller and the training procedure starts all over again, right? So he holds a pinch for 15 seconds. He holds a fist for 15 seconds, a tripod grip, key grip, hand open, relax. Then the hand opens back up. And I ask him to to close his hand. And this time, the hand closes and the media comes rushing around the table asking how it feels like to be able to control this bionic limb. And I just take a step back and I'm thinking in my head, you're a man of God. And so this next video shows one of those international news stations covering the events of that day.
Un quiteño es el primer beneficiado de una prótesis de mano con ayuda en su financiamiento. El programa es realizado por jóvenes de la Universidad de Illinois en Estados Unidos.
Juan Suquillo es excomandante de guerra. Fue así como perdió parte de su brazo. De esto han pasado más de 30 años.
Varios miembros de mi pelotón sufrieron heridas y particularmente la mía me cobró el brazo izquierdo.
Gracias al avance de la tecnología, hoy puede acceder a una prótesis.
Parte de mí ha vuelto.
Jóvenes ingeniosos y con un gran
My hair was
para
cooler
ayudar al
then.
próximo más necesitado han desarrollado una prótesis de brazo mioeléctrico con la posibilidad de retroalimentación sensorial, es decir, sentir como una mano de verdad.
Okay, so a couple things I want to point out here, right? This hand that you see on the table, right? It's like 3 times the size of an average adult human hand. It has wires going everywhere, plugged into breadboards, plugged into my laptop, plugged into 2 power supplies, plugged into the wall, right? Despite that, Juan said that in front of these international news stations that he felt as though a part of him had come back. And that was because he was able to make a pinch with his left hand for the first time in 35 years. In fact, he had forgotten how to make a pinch with his left hand, and we had to retrain his brain by placing a mirror in front of his amputated side, reflecting his intact right hand, and tricking his brain into thinking that his left hand was still there. And he made a pinch with both sides at the same time, and he was able to reactivate his muscles in order to get the machine learning algorithm to work to make a pinch with our bionic hand. So when he said that, he felt as though a part of him had come back. That's when I realized if I stay in academia, if I go the traditional MD PhD route, this will just end up as a journal paper or a university project. And if we want everyone to feel the exact same way that Juan did, we have to commercialize the technology. And that's when Bionic was born. So we came back to the U.S. At the University of Illinois, won the school's business plan competition in 2015, the Illinois Innovation Prize in 2016, several grants from the National Science Foundation, raised a pre-seed round. And then as of September of last year, the Ability Hand is now available nationwide, and it is covered by Medicare in the United States. And so this is what the hand looked like then, right? And this is what it looks like now. And so this is Sergeant Garrett Anderson, who lost his hand in Iraq in 2005, doing push-ups for the first time since his Army days. He can hold like a 50-pound kettlebell and do various exercises. He can do all sorts of activities of daily living. So this was one of our patients, just closing his laptop lid, right? One of our patients in Chicago, she had just become a grandmother for the first time and was able to feed her granddaughter by holding the bottle with her Ability Hand and holding her granddaughter with her natural hand. And it's just made a world of difference for making it easier to do a lot of activities of daily living and improving the quality of life for our users. And so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen just for a second so you guys can see me. Are you guys able to see me on the camera? And so I've got the hand right here with me, and I'll give you guys a quick demonstration of how it all works. So all 5 fingers flex and extend, and the thumb rotates as well. So you can see that all those different movements that I'm doing in the hand there as well. So I'm currently controlling it with these 2 buttons right over here. And these 2 buttons are basically emulating you flexing your wrist in or extending your wrist out. That's the most common way for you to control these myoelectric devices, right? So you can see there's 6 motors in here. So 6 brushless DC motors with planetary gearbox and worm gears on here. And then you can, if I press lightly on the button, then you can go slowly, or you can go much faster. This is the fastest bionic hand on the market. The finger is closed within 200 milliseconds. To put that in perspective, we blink our eyes in about 300 milliseconds. So it's technically faster than the blink of an eye, which is a cool stat. And so if I open the hand twice, then I can switch to a different grip right over here. So this is what we call our key grip or our lateral grip. So if you're holding a key or a piece of paper, and then what I can do is I can just slide the thumb over manually or electrically, and then it switches over to a power grip. So that's a very easy way that our users are just able to switch between the 2 most commonly used grasps. So they account for about 80% of all of our activities of daily living, a power grip and a key grip. And then if you want more precision, then you can even do like, here's like a pinch, right? So you can, and if you're at a rock concert, you can also just rock on. And we have like, there's like 20 pre-programmed grips that you can select from, but the hand does have an API on it that allows you to do individual finger control. So you can do torque, position, and velocity control over all 6 of the brushless DC motors. You can read the encoder value so you know exactly the position, the velocity, and the torque on each one of those motors. And then you can actually stream all the touch sensors as well. It looks like John has a raised hand.
Well, hello there.
Hi, John.
Adil, you tell a great story, but we've gotten to the punchline part. So, so here you have a commercial product, which has been available commercially for how long?
So nationwide since September.
And it is in the hands, so to speak, of recipients these days?
Yes. Yep.
How many do you estimate?
I think we've got at least 50 now.
Congratulations. That's really great progress. And it's being paid for through their insurance or as a retail purchase?
So it is paid for through their insurance. And in particular, we are able to get Medicare coverage on the hand as well. And so, and to put that in perspective, right? So typically for a bionic hand, it used to be like VA and workers' comp. So if you had a workplace accident or if you're in the military, those would be the only ways that you could get this. And that was only about 10% of the people who could afford it. And so by getting it covered by Medicare, we've expanded that access to 75% of patients.
So that means you also went through the whole FDA approval.
Yep, we were FDA, yep, FDA registered and the Medicare like approval process and everything too. Yep.
Well, that's fantastic. And what do the insurers pay for this device?
Yeah, so the insurance, so Medicare typically covers about $30,000 under the specific code. for it's like L6880 is the name of the code, and varies state by state, but on average it's about like 30K for a hand like this.
Fantastic. And sorry about that. I missed the beginning of your talk. So you started with 3D printed homemade stuff.
Yep.
If you've told the story already, I'll catch up on it. But are there past or future connections to e-NABLE, or is this just something that will be cheered on and celebrated by all of us?
Well, that's a fantastic question. And so, I mean, there's probably a couple ways that we probably could get collaborate as well. And I know that, so one thing is we do have an open source version of our hand, and we have an instructables on how to make it. It's not easy to make, but we do have all of that available online, and that includes like, how you do like silicone molding, how you can put like touch sensors in here, how you can do the 3D printed palms.
Good for you.
We use a lot of those techniques still. So for example, our palms actually are 3D printed, but then we reinforce them with actual carbon fiber. This is real carbon fiber that's on here, and we do the layup process. And all of that is done actually in our offices down the hall here in Champaign, Illinois. And so all the silicone molding, all the carbon fiber work, all the fabric work, all the like assembly and all of that stuff we do here in our offices in the US. We will be moving to San Diego fairly shortly in like the next couple months. So there's a lot of opportunities with the Challenge Athletes Foundation out there, and like the military hospitals. And where we're seeing a lot of this technology heading is more towards biological integration. So we started fitting our first patients with osseointegration. So instead of having a socket that goes over the residual limb, they'll have like a titanium implant that goes into their bones, and then the hand would be directly attached to their bones. We're working with other researchers who are doing nerve implants as well, that would enable individual finger control very easily, and you could stimulate those nerves so that when you touch here, you can actually feel it as well. And then also we're this is a fun one too. I've got this right next to me as well. And so this is like a prosthetic finger that we're developing as well. If you look very closely, this is like a 3D printed model of like your knuckle right over here. And the idea is that we directly implant this to your knuckle, and then we suture this onto your residual tendons that are in your hand. And so when you actually flex your natural finger tendons, then the finger will actually move with the proper biomechanics of an unamputated finger. And we've actually done this on cadavers, and the next step is to do like clinical trials with the hand, or with the finger implants. And so this biological integration is kind of where we're moving with a lot of these technologies. And I mean, that's been one of the biggest hurdles that we've seen to adoption on a lot of these prosthetics, is just like, the socket interface is like poor, right? Like the electrode connection, the control interface is not great, right? And so if we can solve that by going more invasive to get the signals how they were more naturally supposed to be controlling these devices, then it's going to really change things for the patients who can use this stuff.
I want to give other people a chance to ask questions too.
Hi there. Yeah, I have some questions, if it's all right.
Yeah.
So the first question I have is about the touch sensing technology that you've mentioned.
Yes.
So one, are these just like force sensors on the fingertips? And if so, how exactly is the sense of touch transmitted to the inside of the socket? Are you using just like haptics, LRAs, or are you using something else?
Yeah, so we're actually just using an ERM, like a single vibration, ERM vibration motor. And here, I'm going to share my screen again so you can see this. Because there is a little bit more of the presentation, but that's okay. I'm fine with like jumping around here. So you can see my presentation again, right? Okay, great. Oh yeah, here, I'll show you guys these videos too, just because they're a lot of fun. So this is a 13-year-old girl who was born with a limb difference, and within minutes she was able to like control the hand with her muscles, right? And so and she was fairly moved by that. Also, this is the para-triathlete national champion. Someone threw him a water bottle and he was able to catch it. Again, like 3 minutes after he put the hand on for the first time. The fingers are super resilient to impact, so you can actually like smash them and they can survive. So this next video, you'll see a piston coming down on the fingers. On the left side is a traditional pin joint finger, and on the on the right side is a traditional pin joint hinge finger, and then on the left side is our compliant finger design that we made that's actually 3D printed with a 3D printed flexible material inside of here. And you'll see what happens when this hammer comes down. So you can see the pin joint version just broke. And then on the left side, the finger just comes back to its original position because of the flexibility there. I've arm wrestled against the para-triathlete national champion and lost. So I need to start working out a bit more, and I'll get my revenge someday. But I don't know. He can also like break boards with it, so I'm a little bit worried on that front if I provoke him too much. And remember, if you guys remember that trend of like doing water bottle flip tricks, where you can we got like a partially filled bottle of water and then you flip it. We can actually do that with the ability hand as well. So. I like the back. Perfect! Perfect! So as you can see, we have a lot of fun with this stuff. We can even make the hand like walk on its own, and we did that for Halloween, right? You can hook it up to like 3D or 360-degree wrist rotators, and then like do that fun stuff, right? So I'm gonna go to your question. Okay, so this screen right over here. So these are the sensors that we use in the fingertips. So they're customized force sensitive resistors in particular. And so they've been customized in particular to have a high dynamic range. So I believe we can get down to 10 grams. Like we can detect 10 grams of weight all the way to 10 kilograms. And like everything in between those. And there's 6 of them. So they're per digit, right? So there's one on the fingertip, the finger pad, 2 on the lateral aspect, 2 on the medial aspect of the distal finger. And so we're actually able to stream all 30 of those touch sensors, right? 5 digits times 6, 30, over Bluetooth, over a USB or a USB connection. And so even though there's a single vibration motor that we have in the socket right now, and it's just whatever that gets the maximum is the one that triggers that vibration motor. For things like implanted electrodes, we can actually detect which one is actually being touched and then stimulate that particular area with a certain pattern to make it feel like it's coming from their phantom limb on the distal fingertip that they don't have anymore. So I know that was a very long answer to your question, but there were just a bunch of fun videos in the meantime.
For sure, for sure. So just to continue with this, do the FSRs that you have in the distal tips of these limbs, do they result in a meaningful increase in outcome measures? For example, like heuristics like box and block test, or something more holistic like the capful?
Yeah, I don't think I have that in these slides. No. Yeah, I don't think that, because these are more general. But here's one example, right? So this is 85-year-old triple amputee EQ Sylvester, who is grasping a hollow eggshell while blindfolded on his first try without cracking it. because of the touch feedback that he has in there, right? So for example, we did a cup grasping task to measure like the grip aperture that you would have without crushing the cup. And we found that with the touch feedback, regardless of whether you could actually see the cup or not, we had a statistically significant difference in the amount you were basically crushing the cup versus when you didn't have that feedback, you would actually like smash it a lot more, right? So that was one example. We did an eggshell grasping task, and we crushed way less eggshells than we did with the when the touch feedback was off. You crushed more versus when the touch feedback was on. And really where this is going as well is, I mean, there's also the intangible benefit, right? So Sergeant Anderson, when he holds his daughter's hand, he can actually feel it, right? And to be able to get that sensation, I mean, that's something that can't as easily be quantified, right? I mean, you could do it through a survey, but like it's not like a box and blocks types occupational therapy task, right? Now, that being said, I'll show you one more video right after this. And this is another example of
Mike has
what the touch does.
So he has different spots on his arm that feel like different parts of his finger are being touched. So on the ability hand, I'm going to touch the pinky. And Mike, where does that feel? That's just wild. That's awesome. And so by moving this vibration motor around, you can actually feel different individual fingers, right? So you're feeling a vibration on the ring right there, right? Right. Nice.
Fingers right there.
Wow. For index?
Index.
And you guys get the point, right? So basically his nerves were rewired so that if we touch different parts of his residual limb, it feels like you're touching different parts of his hand. And so we can map that to his residual limb and then have it feel like that. And so we've done both, like what we quantified it with like tasks that he could do in the lab, but also there's just those intangible benefits of being able to feel those fingers again that go a long way with our patients.
Certainly. And of course, many simple clinical measures like the box and blocks is like flawed for a variety of reasons. It sounds like you definitely believe that the future of interface with this bionic arm is through like something more invasive like implants, something like osseointegration. Although I will say, of course, like osseointegrated limbs are much more common in older folks just because of the weak point that it exposes in the middle canal, right? Do you see an alternative path for this where you take like your one vibration little motor that you have now and expand that into sort of like a more full scale like grid on the inside of a socket?
Yeah, so we've done experiments like that in the past where we used to have like an array, right, of vibration motors for this stuff. If you have targeted sensory reinnervation like that last guy I showed you, then yes, I do believe that. If you're doing a full-on sensory substitution thing, I don't think that works very well in practice. And there's been a lot of papers that have debunked, especially from like, if you look at like Sleeman Benzmeier and Max Ortiz-Catalan's group, your brain only has like a certain amount of capacity to rewire itself, especially when it comes to sensory substitution like things. And it works better for cross-modal plasticity. So like if you have a blind person and then like you're giving them feedback on like, what the world looks like, your brain can better adapt to that. But what we found is that if you still have like a sense of touch and you're trying to replace that sense of touch elsewhere on your body, not anatomically located in the correct area, that it's not nearly as effective. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I've read a lot of the work of like David Eagleman, who does a lot of stuff with haptics. But of course, all of those things that he'd be describing would then be cross-modal plasticity. Is that right?
Exactly, because I think he had patients with deafness, right? And then he was
right.
Like vibrate like auditory stuff back. Some of the stuff I don't know, just where he was like, the stock market and like, getting Those are a little bit out there. I don't know if that's actually going to work, but the cross-modal stuff definitely.
Yeah. Some of them are very cute. The reason I'm wondering is because like a lot of the future that you think about with like internal neural interfaces often rely on a certain method of amputation. For example, like congenital amputees will often not enjoy the same benefits of that. Do you have any vision there?
You know, that's really interesting. So we actually have several like congenital users of our hands, right? And the interesting thing there is that it's not like, you know, they imagine that they're closing a phantom limb, right? On that side.
Right. Basically, you form your own arbitrary mapping.
Exactly, right? And so they have also been interested in some of the, because so we're partnering with UT Southwestern / Nerves Incorporated. They're a DARPA haptics funded project. They're doing implanted electrodes in particular. They're actually doing clinical trials right now of their implanted electrodes. And a lot of our even congenital patients are interested, particularly because they're kind of interested in knowing what exactly is even going on down there, right? Like, is it even possible for them to, like, you know, control some like arbitrary like device on the, or have some arbitrary mapping to control that device on the end of their residual limb, because it's not going to be like natural like a human limb is, but could be even. And this is something we don't even know, right? Because they've been without one. Does the presence of one then kind of change that construct?
Sure. So there's sort of two things there, right? There's like the arbitrary mapping that you form for control for different grips, and then there's of course like the feedback, which also doesn't map into something real. And just speaking from my experience, like I'm a congenital amputee, and I use the like I have like Tasca Coapt, but of course I get like 7 or 8 degrees of freedom on this, and it's usually, but it's just it's all made up, but it still works, but it's just made up. And so like a lot of the benefits of like intuitiveness like don't really matter. But it can work. I see we have some other raised hands, so I don't want to use too much time.
I just wanted to jump in and say that, sorry, Eric's next.
I think you can raise now to continue.
Fantastic presentation. So I'm curious, because you're bringing the cost down for the really fancy stuff. e-NABLE works kind of 2 factors of 10 below where your cost is currently at, right? We're trying to do $300.
Yep.
So if you were to make a bargain version of this, right? Only 3D printing, what kinds of motors, right? Because we tend to just, let's toss a servo in it. We don't do brushless motors and planetary gears, that kind of stuff. We could. It's just, what kind of vision would you have for an e-NABLE device that we could really deploy?
Yeah, and so the thing is, the open source version of like our hand that we have on there, I think the component cost is like $550 on that, which still is, it's more than 300, right? And I'm just talking about component cost. I'm assuming when you're saying 300, that's probably more than the component cost that you're looking at, right? Or is that what you're talking about, component cost?
That's what I'm thinking about, and I'm thinking like order of magnitude. So 500. I think that's a good order of magnitude for what we can do.
Got it. So we were using these like Pololu micro metal gear motors. Now, that being said, we burnt those out all the time. And so for that reason, I don't want to recommend those, but they were like 16 bucks a pop, right? For each of those motors. But we moved away from that because what we like, the biggest thing that we found for our users is they want reliability, they want like durability, they want to be able to trust that they can use this hand on a consistent basis, right? And if we gave them something like I mean, like I've got like, this was Mark IV of the ability hand that I've got right over here, right? And I forgot, like we can make this for like 200 bucks, right? Linear actuators on here, right? But like we gave it to the US Army sergeant, and like within a day, he just completely destroyed this thing, right? Because again, 3D printed plastic, there's ways to reinforce it, right? Like you can use TPU filaments, right? And the fingers that I've got over here that I can like smash, right? It's got a flexible 3D printed bone inside of it, which I think I've got right over here. So this is like the actual bone that we have inside the fingers. We'll 3D print a mold. We'll put it in the 3D printed mold, inject the silicone around it, right? And then it ends up like those fingers that are in here, right? So we're still leveraging those low-cost 3D printing methods, but we're not using them as like the end like device, because these rigid joints would just like break very easily. So there's ways you can do it. I mean, even we're looking into more budget versions of our hand too. At some level, though, we come from like I guess like a philosophy though too, that we don't want to like skimp on people in like developing nations, because they're the ones who need it most, right? They're the ones who would benefit the most from having the access to like the best technology. And so some of the ways that we're looking into doing that is by getting into those markets is by subsidizing the cost, right, of the prosthetic hands, right? So I've got like a goal that like, you know, within a year I want to get on Jimmy Kimmel and have him arm wrestle the hand, and that could solicit donations to help subsidize the cost for people, the 25% on Medicaid and uninsured in the US who can't afford the hand, as well as the 80% in developing nations, right? So we're looking into those measures too. And once we start mass producing these like on a scale that's much larger than like, you know, like 100 a year, like or 1,000 a year, then we'll be able to really drive those costs even further down, and maybe hit price points that are even more like orders of magnitude lower. Just to put things in perspective on that side too, because our hand has been optimized for humans to do human tasks, robotics companies that are trying to make robots that do human tasks are actually purchasing our hands as well. So Facebook has bought 2 of our hands. NASA will probably be buying 1 or 2 of them soon as well. Apptronic, which makes humanoid robots, they bought a couple of them. Several X Prize finalists for doing like avatar stuff, they're purchasing our hands. Because they're also order of magnitudes lower than the hands that are available to them for their purposes, right?
It's amazing. It's amazing.
And so, sorry, go ahead.
I just have a quick follow-up before John. My other question is about the sensing, because you've got the myoelectric sensing. That's tricky, and that's tough to do low cost and send to clinics around the world. What kind of solutions would you have for something like that if we can't do myosensing?
Yeah, actually, no, I've got a great solution for doing a low cost myosensing thing. So here, let me share the screen again. And yeah, there were just so many questions that I didn't really get a chance to go back into the presentation, but this is one of the things I would have mentioned as well. So this guy right here, right? So you know, the giant mess of a breadboard, we got down to the size of like half of a credit card, right? But here's the kicker, right? So if you look in that top middle picture, like right over here, these electrodes, they're typically like $20 a pop for like these stainless steel domes or whatever, right? And then like and then you have to like amplify them or whatever, right? We used stainless steel rivets from a hardware store that were 20 cents a piece, and they worked just as well as those like $20 electrodes. And if you're talking about like, you know, really just reducing like the price on that, then that was one way to do that. Now, the tricky thing is that if you're marketing it as a medical device in the US, then you have to get it. That in particular, because it's making contact with your skin, is going to be an FDA Class 2 device, and you would have to go through approval. And that's why we actually are agnostic to the control system. We don't sell the sensors with our hand. We let the clinician decide what the best control system would be. It could be 2-site myo control. It could be coapt pattern recognition. It could be like implanted electrodes. It could be whatever you want, right? We just let the clinician and the patient decide what would be best for them on that front. But if you're not marketing it as a medical device, then you could get away with things like that in particular. You might be able to. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give like legal advice on that front. But
very cool, very cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
2 comments. First one is a quick response to what you just said. You know, that utility of a metal rivet for 20 cents versus a medical grade electrode, which works no better for $20, is an example of something that the FDA should push back against. I have a metal belt buckle touching my belly right this minute. It doesn't need, and it shouldn't need FDA approval. There's a role for common sense here.
Well,
And
okay. In all fairness, there is like an electrical path to those electrodes, right? That's the reason, right? I mean, I'm on board with you. I'm totally on board with you. I mean, that's why we went the 20-cent rivet route, right?
I understand that electricity is there. I understand that the voltage is actually low enough that, again, it's not a concern. If I had that voltage on my belt buckle, my belly would still be fine. Moving on. But let me say, you've gone through the FDA process. And my impression actually is that there are people in the FDA who believe that the regulations need to be made more reasonable. And that strikes me as a conversation worth having. And, you know, if it opens up a route towards substantially cheaper devices that might be made by a group like e-NABLE, we'd be happy to lend our voice, although I'm not sure our voice would be helpful. So I'll move on to my second point. My second point goes back to the earlier discussion with regard to sensory feedback. I just want to make sure that you guys have seen this viral video that's been going around about the rubber hand, the rubber arm illusion.
Is this the Facebook link that was just posted on here?
Well, I can't answer that.
Oh, okay.
But it's a video in which a guy with two good arms is asked to put one arm under a towel.
Sure. Yep. And they smash it with a hammer, and then it feels
That's
like...
right. That's right. What's important about that, first of all, of course, is that it's a very compelling demonstration about very rapid neuroplasticity. If, I presume, you go through that in training process in which you stroke the rubber hand and provide the stimulation. And that kind of thing can make a huge difference. I used to study perception and so on. And so if that's not part of what you've explored, it might make things that didn't work suddenly start working, like changing a few lines of code.
Indeed, yeah. And you know, one of the things that why I think that works, and this goes back to what was discussing with Nick, was that with the rubber hand illusion, it's anatomically like located in the same. You feel that like pain perception in the same way. True. Because you're visually attending to something that looks like it's there, right? The problem with like general sensory substitution is that it's not anatomically located in the same position, and so for your brain to remap itself, there's some limitations there that I think are going to be a lot harder to get across when you can replace it with an actual limb. That being said, to your point, I would definitely say that now that, you know, with our hand, because it's fully sensorized, I think the context is important, right? Like you can't just like, you know, it's not just like sitting around and like vibrating someone's skin and being like, oh, does this feel like something? No, you need to be like actually doing an activity. And if like all the other senses are engaged in that activity, it fills in those blanks to make it feel like, okay, now I'm getting this vibration at the same time. This should be feeling like, you know, I'm holding a glass or holding a hand or like whatever. Yeah.
Well, right. But without the internal dialogue, another thing that emerges if you watch that video is that there are moments when the experimenter is stroking the rubber hand and is no longer stroking the actual hand, and the guy is filling in the blanks and saying, oh yeah, I feel it. It's really weird. What he's feeling is his own illusion, which he thinks is part of the trick.
Yeah.
Again, as a fallen biological psychologist, I want to say don't underestimate the programmability of human perception. But like computer programming, it's not going to happen just because you say, did it happen? It's going to happen because you actually study what are the leverage points.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I added in the chat, we're a couple minutes over, but I've got a little bit of flexibility. I'm sure that Rick's got some questions. He's been doing some Midi work. If maybe I can pass it to you, Rick. You're on mute.
There we go. Sorry, that was my deer in the headlights look. Yeah. No, I enjoyed your presentation. Thank you. We're actually looking at some different methodologies that we're doing as well. I hope you don't mind. I sent you a couple of links, but one of the things that we're looking at is we're switching an awful lot of our coding to Midi. And the reason we're doing that is the Midi protocol, not only has it been around almost 60 years, but it has a wealth of data in the protocol that's already been designed. It for touch, feel, sensitivity, it has even breath. So we're implementing Midi for that reason, because the protocol was established. We actually have amputees as a side effect that are plugging into our giant, we have a wall of synthesizers, and they're plugging into these synthesizers and playing them. We've got one kid with no arms and no feet that you guys all know, and he's playing 5 instruments now. So we're designing specialized instruments to do this. But because of the wealth of data that's in Midi, and you start looking at when I write Adreno, but it's so limited because you don't have the touch feedback that's already built into the Midi protocol. Plus, it's free.
Sure.
And we're having really good luck with it. I actually sent you a link to a hand that's being completely controlled by Midi.
That's awesome.
And it's yeah, and it's actually using a microbit board, which I don't have to tell you how cheap they are. It has everything in it. It has temperature. It has so many sensors already built in. What are they, like $12?
Sure. Yeah.
And I can run it all day long on 2 AA's, and the whole thing is driven on Midi. And to get the touch feedback, we're actually using, to get around not having to hook Myos up, we're actually using very, very small, low-powered servos that put pressure on the arm for each sensor. So it pushes a little bit harder, but the contact is rubber. There's no electrical signal.
Wow.
And I sent you a link if you're interested. And if there's a full looky-loo in there, I'm not trying to encroach, just thought it'd make you laugh.
That's cool. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to check it out.
Thanks, guys. Sorry, I find my mute button again. I don't know.
So any other last questions? Any other things to share about the device?
I had a couple last questions, just real quick. It's all right. Given your experience as someone creating kind of like the next generation of bionic limbs and being excited about neural interfaces, I was wondering, have you ever heard about or watched the Cybathlon?
Yep. Yeah.
In Europe? I was wondering what your take is on both times it was held. The winner of the prosthetic arm race used a low-tech body-powered prosthesis, right? This is something that I see all the time, and I feel in a lot of media coverage that comes out about new bionics, the journalists will mention that the big downside is the cost. In actuality, it appears that body-powered prosthetics are still often the most functional. And that includes in the Cybathlon, included, participants with neural interfaces, with implants. And I believe they came in like 3rd and 8th or something, right? And then the number 1 was the guy with the maker hand who had like $50 in parts. I was wondering if you have opinions on that.
Yeah, so the biggest thing I would say that is missing from like myoelectrics and like these bionic limbs is proprioception, right? So, and the reason why the hook does so well is that when you move your shoulder, you know exactly where your shoulder is. And because you know exactly where your shoulder is, you know exactly how open or closed your hook is going to be, right?
Right.
And that is that missing link that is so necessary for the prosthetic devices in particular, right? Sorry, not the myoelectric devices in particular, is that missing proprioceptive link.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that intrigued me very much about like the Nerves Incorporated approach and with their implanted electrodes is that what they're doing is they're they're taking like your radial and your ulnar nerve, let's say your transradial, they'll take those two nerves. They have the fascicles that are inside those nerves, right? So there's like around like 8 or 10 of them, right, per nerve, depending on like where you're at, like distally, right? And then each one of those fascicles has like, I don't know, 40,000 neurons or something like within it, right? But they'll break apart the fascicles, and what they found out is that your motor neurons run along certain fascicles, and your sensory neurons run along different fascicles there. So you can separate your motor control from your sensory feedback and have different electrodes placed on both. But what they said was that they were actually able to stimulate the sensory nerves or neurons in such a way that they could induce proprioception in the perception of the user, right? So it feels like they're moving their phantom finger that is no longer there anymore, right? And I think if that code can be cracked and that can be made to feel 100% consistent, that's when you'll see that the multi-articulated hands, these more advanced technological hands, can start to approach that level of functionality that you might be seeing with like the body powered hooks. The other thing is just the response time as well. You can close a body powered hook in like 75 milliseconds, right? I think your Tasca probably closes in about like 500 milliseconds. So that's like orders of magnitude slower.
It all depends on if you try to do a direct to grip, right? In which case the machine learning classification will take, I think it's around a couple hundred milliseconds of latency before it even starts. And that's just to converge, right? For convergence upon the correct grip. If you operate it in a more simple fashion, it would be faster. But yeah, there's quite a bit of latency.
That's the control, but I'm talking about the speed, like the physical limitation of the fingers itself, right? Like the task, its motors can't move fast enough to like get 75 millisecond close time, right? But like with a natural hand, I can just like go like this, right? But
right.
Most of the multi-articulated hands, they'll go like,
yes, they're quite a bit slower.
Yeah, and so it's that response time along with that lack of proprioception. So here's something that's interesting, right? We have have you ever tried a linear transducer?
Yes.
And so with a linear transducer, when you hook it up with most of the multi-articulated hands, it controls the velocity of the grip, right? So for those of you who aren't aware, so a linear transducer, it's very much like a body-powered like device. So you're wearing a figure of 9 harness over your shoulders. It has a pull string on it. And then instead of like that cable being directly attached to the end effector, so when you like squeeze your shoulders together like a hook will open, it measures the amount of pull on that string, and then it digitizes it so that you can use it as a control input. So you can use your shoulders still to control it, an electric device instead. So because our hand has, it moves so much faster with that 200 millisecond close time, what we did is on a linear transducer, we made it basically into like a body powered device where it controls the position of our fingers depending on where the position of your shoulder is. So, and then you can just use like a button to switch grips, right? Like our power switch button, like you can use that to switch to a different grip, and then you can use your shoulder to open and close that. I think that is like a really cool hybrid, technology that's like, both like body powered control with a multi-articulated hand that you can get the advantage of having the different grips, right? And the different like hand morphologies, along with just moving your shoulder and getting that proprioception and that tight control there, that you could have like the best of both worlds. And I think we've got like one or two patients that have this system are in the process of being fit with that system. And that I think is definitely worth exploring because that can cover that gap.
Yeah. I'm very interested in cable-driven systems, particularly for this reason. It's like, like you mentioned, since a long time ago, hundreds of years, they've had the hook or whatever. And so we see this kind of like graph of functionality, and then Myo comes around and it really kind of dips down, and then it kind of goes back up. And then eventually in the future, it will overtake. And so clearly it's like, will be the future. But I'm wondering in kind of like the medium term, right, if we should actually be exploring more of these, in particular for low cost solutions because it already works, and like potential hybrid approaches like this, like you described with linear transducer, or perhaps in the opposite direction, right? Say you actually control a myoelectric device using EMG, right? And then what like a Bowden cable here can do is actually just like introduce tension or compression on your joint and give you proprioception.
Sure.
In the other way. So it's just something I've been thinking about.
You know, I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show you guys a couple more videos. So I have like two versions of this talk. One's like the research talk, and one's like the general talk. So I'm gonna open up the research one because there were we do a couple things, or we have done in the past a couple things with proprioception in particular. Let me load this guy though. Let's see. Okay, so you remember that very first in-move hand that I was showing you guys? So here I'm going to share my screen again so you guys can see this. All right. Okay, the top left one, the open source in-move hand, right? So we modified the servos. So this was a tendon-driven hand, right? So you've got fishing line that goes up into the fingers, and then we modified the servo horns so you could have another fishing line tendon that would go back to the proximal portion of the elbow, or the forearm. And then we had a 3D printed contact pad that we would just like adhere to your skin that was directly coupled to this fishing line. And so in this video, you'll see. Let's see if I can play this. Okay. When these fingers are moving, do you see how like on the right side the skin is being stretched?
It tugs on you.
It tugs on you, right? And so this was a very simple way to like couple like your skin to like the sense of proprioception, right? You know exactly how fast these fingers are moving based on how fast your skin is stretching, and you know exactly where the finger is positioned based on like how much your skin has stretched in that particular area, right? And so we actually, this is published in the paper that we published in Eurohaptics like, wow, 8 years ago now, man, that's crazy. We did a study, right? So we had 6 different grips that, 6 different grips that we had users in the lab do, and these were all people with natural limbs, right? So like non-amputee patients. And so we would present them, we would do these 5 different grips, and they would feel like the skin stretch on their index finger, their middle finger, and their thumb, right? So there were 3 contact pads, and those would correspond to those 3 digits in particular, right? And so of these like 6 different grips, we'd show them like, you know, we do 30 times, 5 times each, and they would train for like 6 minutes, just associating those different skin stretch patterns with each one of these grips that were being done. And again, after 6 minutes of training, then we would like blindfold them, we'd put earmuffs on them, and then they would have to guess just based on the skin stretch alone, which grip they were actually doing, right? And they had 88% accuracy on average across like I forgot how many subjects we had, like either 5 or 10 or like more, right? And again, after 6 minutes of training just from skin stretch, they could detect which finger was being moved, whether you're doing like a pinch, like a tool, a power grip, and all of that. You can imagine that if you were doing this for an extended period of time, like how good you could get in resolving that proprioception in particular. The only problem with this method is that it requires, you know, these contact pads to be adhered to your skin. So how do you easily don and doff this device, right? And that's that's the only reason why we haven't like continued to pursue that particular method of proprioception, is because from a practical standpoint, it just doesn't work. Like I guess, yeah, from like, you know, donning and doffing, it doesn't work. Functionally, it works great. But how do you make that practical? We were thinking like maybe you could get a piercing or something like that, and then like, you know, hook onto like a piercing, and that could potentially work. But, you know, then you'd have to convince someone to get a piercing, or like embed like a magnet. Like it's tricky. And we weren't sure whether to go down that rabbit hole or not, right? There were other things we needed to do at the time, but that's something that, you know, we always have in the back of our heads, like, can we return to this and see if there's a better way to implement this in the short term, right? That's because that's important as well.
Got it. Very interesting. Yeah, that's sort of like exactly what I had envisioned. But yeah, super cool that you've already done a test on something like this.
Yeah, it is super effective. It is really, really effective. I just wish there was a way to just make it like like more easily accessible for people to do regularly.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, don doff times have to be super short. I work on exoskeletons, and so like for Don off time, it's like a huge thing. Basically, people won't wear your stuff otherwise. So
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So what lab are you in?
So I used to work on prosthetics at the MIT Media Lab.
Okay.
Right now I work at Google X. Yeah, mostly prosthetics and exos.
Nice. Were you in Hugh Herr's group then?
Yeah, that's right. In
Nice.
biomechatronics.
Nice. At Google, were you working with Elliot Roos at all?
Yeah. Elliot is he's my mentor from back in the undergrad days. Yeah, I'm actually meeting with him in like an hour or so.
Tell him I say hi. I just saw him a couple of weeks ago at the robotics conference in Philly. And fun fact, the first paper that I ever wrote was with him. So yeah, he's
nice.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I remember right after he was at MIT, he was at Northwestern for a while, right? He was at the RIC.
Yeah, so I worked with him when he was doing his PhD at Northwestern.
Solid.
So I was doing an internship at RIC. With him, so that part of the story where we got to collaborate with RIC, that was actually
super cool. One last super quick question. So about the you in passing, you mentioned your API, and you mentioned basically you have lots of data streams available for, even though you only have a single motor controlling haptics right now, you basically have access to all the data streams for the FSRs on the fingers. And all the BLDCs also. Is that, for example, like, are you talking about the like control API where you connect to like a Myo, like a Myo control system, or you mean specifically like for reads and plotting? Like, if there were to be like an open source like Myo pattern rec system, is just like use the standard electrical coupling and everything, and do you have like an API reference?
Yep. If you go to our GitHub, you can actually read through our ICD. That's all. Like, our API is open source. So yeah, I can send you a link to it. I'm trying. I don't know if you Google GitHub Psionic, I don't know if it'll show up, but I can.
I'm sure I can find it.
But yeah, and if you can't find it, just let me know, and I can send you a link to that. But yeah, so any control system that you develop, you'd be able to use it with our API.
Solid.
So one of the things that we do, for example, and this is a demo that Elliot got to try out actually a couple weeks ago at ICRA, the IEEE conference that we were at, is Google has a open source software called MediaPipe for tracking like hand movements and like body movements. So we have a really awesome demo, and again, because our response time on the fingers are so quick, where in real time you can actually control each individual finger just by putting your hand up to the webcam. And that was one of the things that's why a lot of the robotics researchers are interested, is because there's this like real-time teleoperation control that you can do with these with our bionic hand in particular, using our API, that you can't really do with any of the other bionic hands that are on the market.
Yeah, if low latency like open to close makes such a big difference, like is there a reason other hand companies like haven't prioritized that, as opposed to like adding more grips that no one will use?
I think it's because they were prioritizing grip strength over speed, and so we kind of like we did sacrifice a little bit of the strength to get a little bit of boost on the speed, but because we're actually using yes, Eric, that is the correct that is the open source version. But because we're using BLDC motors and we're using field-oriented control, we're actually able to optimize both. So we can get a high torque at low speed, in addition to the high speed at low torque that we need as well. But the thing is, BLDCs aren't as easy to implement, right? You need your own controllers in there. We've got 7 microcontrollers in the hand, right? One dedicated microcontroller per BLDC motor that we've got in there. And then each one of them has like their 6 MOSFETs or whatever, and like where we do all the motor control like on the board in there, right? With a brushed DC motor, you don't need any of that, right? Like you just have a single half bridge, and then like you can just control it that way, like with just sending PWM, right? That's not how BLDC works. And so a lot of actually Tasca, when we talked to them like 3-4 years ago, when we were actually doing our motor search, And they said that they actually didn't go down that BLDC route in particular because of the complexity of the electronics that you need inside the hand to make that work.
Yeah, I mean, definitely getting your motor controllers working is one extra step that you always have to go through. But I mean, are you like, how exactly how like are you guys using like closed loop torque control and everything in your PID loop? Like that's what, like how fast is your loop rate? Like a couple kilohertz?
At least a couple of kilohertz. I don't remember that off the top of my head. But yes, we are closing. I think we're doing PD. I don't know if we're doing PID. But yeah, we are closing those loops internally. And then I think through our UART interface, we can actually get, I think it's like 480 hertz or something like that. So through the API, that you'd be able to have an update rate of like 480 hertz over UART. And we're about to implement RS-485, and I think that might be even faster to make that happen too. So there's going to be some interesting control that you guys, like researchers, would be able to do because of that fast refresh rate.
Yeah, I mean, we use RS-485 for everything, just from like, you know, you don't have to worry as much about errors with using a differential signal, and connect as many devices as you want. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and we have plans to make a wrist and an elbow soon too. We've got a 5-year goal of making an ability leg that you can do a triathlon in, and that's one of the reasons why we're moving out to San Diego as well, because Challenge Athletes Foundation holds a para triathlon, and a lot of those people will be interested in doing that stuff. So yeah, lots of exciting stuff coming out.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited to see it.
And you're in the Bay currently?
Yeah, that's right. I'm in San Francisco.
Got it. Yeah, so when we go to San Diego, if you ever want to just head south and visit us there, we won't be too far. Closer than Illinois, but
that's true. Truth. All right. Well, yeah. Thank you so much for the talk. This has been great.
It's great stuff, Adil.
Thank you.
And Adil, right now we're just cheering you on, and it's great to compare notes, but keep an eye out for ways in which we might be able to leverage each other's complementary attributes.
Absolutely. And you guys are a nonprofit organization, correct?
Yeah, sort of. There is a nonprofit that happens to handle the small amount of money that we process, but we are a global network of volunteers. But they include people like Nick and Rick, who I think are doing genuinely cutting edge work on the side. And I think we're all looking for ways of popularizing, democratizing the technology that is emerging, and contributing to the non-democratized ventures like yours that are working to reach people.
Awesome. And yeah, I'm glad we finally made this connection, because yeah, John, I've been following your stuff for like a decade now. So
a bold claim, but it could be almost a decade.
Yeah. I remember, yeah, back in like 2012 or so. I feel like that's when yeah, like when
that's
this
true.
Started, when Open Bionics was getting started with their stuff, and yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance finally.
Yes, it's likewise.
Awesome. So these will be available online. Thanks again for joining us today. And I will share a link to the Instructables page that Eric put in the chat. That seems like a really great place for people to start.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
And thanks for roping me in. Talk to you later.
See ya.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Good meeting you again. Thank you.